Hi, I'm Chris from LaunchCode, and this is my colleague Paul. And in this video, we're going to go through just a live coding session, just to give you an idea of how to go about live coding, what it's like, some of the steps that you should go through when you're participating in a job interview, and if you have to go through live coding, and just try to make it as real as possible. So I'm going to be the interviewee, Paul's going to be the interviewer, and he's got a problem for me.
Yeah, you ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, great. So for this problem, Chris, well, really for any live coding kind of session, we're just going to pretend you and I are two programmers. We work at the company together. We're working on a project that already exists, and we're just adding some code to it. So what our kind of project is doing already is it's just randomly setting strings. Sometimes they're going to be words, sometimes they're going to be numbers, sometimes it's going to be words and numbers or various symbols. So essentially, we're just going to get some input. And that input, for now, just our test case is going to be LaunchCode.
Okay.
So that's our input. Essentially, what I want you to do, Chris, what our objective is, we need to do a couple of different things to this string. First of all, we need to remove all the vowels from the string. And then we want to remove every other character from the string.
Okay.
And then finally, we want to return whatever's left.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Let me kind of walk through this a second. So with this string, for instance, we would do the first step would be to take out all the vowels. So we would take out, A, U, O, E, and we would get L, N, C, H, C, D, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And then I'm going to take out every other character from this one.
Yes.
Right? And does it matter, like, if I do the evens or odds, or?
So it does matter. Our desired output here is we're going to keep the first one, we're going to keep the third one, we're going to keep the fifth one.
Okay.
So every odd occurrence we're going to keep.
I'm removing these guys.
Yes, the underlined ones are the ones we're going to remove.
Okay, so then I would end up with L, C, C.
Yes, that's going to be our desired output.
Okay. I think I understand that.
Okay.
Can a string have this has only characters in it? Could it have, you said numbers, what about like spaces?
It could have numbers, it could have just blank spaces, it can have symbols, but still this is our objective. We're going to remove all the vowels, and then we're just going to remove every other character from whatever's left over from that. So.
Okay, and then I'm just going to return. I don't need to print it or anything like that, right?
No, we're going to return it because we're going to use it later. Excellent. So for this example, you can use whatever programming language you'd like. If you want to pseudocode it first, you can, but I do want to see it in some actual programming language.
Okay, cool.
If you have questions, feel free to shout them out. If not, I'll leave you to your own devices.
Cool. Yeah, I think I'm going to start. I just want to kind of outline the steps and kind of not like every line of code, but just at a high level way with some high level things to think through these. So I know that my first objective is going to be to take out all the vowels of the input string, and to do that, one way I could do it at least would be to loop through that string, look at each character, and determine whether or not it was a vowel. So I'm going to say loop over input and remove vowels. And that, I think, this part, I'm not sure how I'm going to check to see if something's a vowel. It's something I'm going to have to figure out, but there's probably some different ways I can do that, but I think I'll try to do that once I get started coding. Then I think I'm going to need a second loop. It might be too complicated to try to take out every other character while I'm also checking for vowels. I might have to keep a counter or something like that. That would be easy to mess up. So I'm just gonna do it the way that makes the most sense to me right now, which would be to do a second loop, and then I'm gonna say loop over the vowel-less string, and remove. We said we wanted to take out the odd index characters. So this would be 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. Removing the 1 and third. So I'm going to remove odd index chars. Okay, so those are like my two top level steps. There's some details there that I'm going to have to figure out, but I think I'm just going to jump in and start doing some code and kind of work out those pieces as I go. Okay, so input, return statement, I'm going to make a function to kind of bundle all this stuff up together. I'm going to use Python, and I'm going to call my function, what do we want to call it? It's kind of a weird set of things we're doing, so let me just call it something generic. I'm going to call it process string.
Okay.
It needs one input. I'm going to call my input a_stir. Okay, and let's see. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is to loop over the input and remove the vowels. So I'm going to need a for loop. So I'm going to say for and C in a stir. So this will be each character of the input string one at a time. And then I need to check to see if each of these characters is a vowel. So let's see, how could I do that? I think, maybe there's like a built-in function in Python or something that I could use, but I don't remember that. So I'm just gonna make a list of vowels and check to see if that character's in the list.
Okay.
So I'm gonna do it that way. I'm gonna say vowels equals a list with A, E, I, O, U, and then Y should Y be considered a vowel
That's
or
a
not?
good question. So that wasn't clear in our requirements. Let's say
Right.
Y is not a vowel.
Okay, so I'll just A-E-I-O-U, that's good. That's where I'll leave it. Cool, and so I'm gonna loop through the string and I can say if the character is, well, I kind of want the inverse. I don't want to say if the character is in the vowels list because I want to say if the character is not in the vowels list, I want to keep it. So I'm going to say if C is not in vowels, that means I want to keep that character and I need somewhere to put it. So I guess I'm going to need a new variable to hold all the characters I want to keep. So let me call that, I have to put it in here. I'm just going to, in between these two lines of code, I'll make a new variable called a_stir cons for consonants, the consonants from a_stir. And since I'm going to add things to it, I need to initialize it to the empty string. So it'll start up in the empty string and then I can add characters one at a time if I find out that they're not a vowel. So for each character, if it's not in the vowels list, I'm going to say a_stir cons plus equals that character. So I'm just tacking on the consonants one at a time. So when I finish with this loop, I should have gone all the way through the string and I should have kept only the consonants. So I should have, this thing should be basically this at that step.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Okay. So I think that's good. The next thing I want to do is loop over the vowel list string and remove the odd index characters. So I'm going to need another loop for that. So for, and what do I want my loop bounds to be? Well, I'm going to loop, I need to know what the index of the things I'm looking at are. So if I use a for in loop, that's not going to work. So I need to use an index loop. I need to say something like for I in range. And then I want to loop over this string. So range should be len of a_stir cons. Okay, so in this case, if I had this, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the length would be 6, and my range would be something like 0 to 5.
Okay.
So that should get me where I want to go, and then I can check the index each time. So that's going to be my if statement inside of this one. I'm going to say if I want to remove the odd index characters, which means I want to keep the even index characters. So I'm going to use the same technique I did here, where I have a check. I'm checking for the things I want to keep. So if I modulo 2 is 0, then I want to keep it. And I guess I need somewhere to put this thing too, the same way I had to build up the vowel list string. So I'm going to need another variable. I'll put it up here, and I'll say final stir, initialize it to the empty string.
Okay.
That's supposed to be 2 single quotes instead of a double quote. Then I can add these characters to that. So final stir plus equals, let's see. So I got the index, but I don't have the actual character. I don't want to put plus equals I because that would be like a number.
Yeah.
So I need to get the character out of the string at that index. So I'll say a_stir cons bracket I. Okay, so let me check that. If I find a character at an even index, I want to keep it, which means I'm going to remove the odd index characters. And then I just need to return it. So I exit my loop and say return final stir. Okay, so I think that's good. Can run through a test case or something?
Yeah,
maybe?
let's go ahead and do that. Why don't you take us through this test case?
Okay.
Just what's happening kind of
Okay.
line by line.
Cool. So yeah, so if I start with that input, I'm supposed to get this at the end, and we'll check that. So I'll start here. When I come in, I'm going to have LaunchCode as my input string.
Okay.
For CNA stir, so for each character in here, I'm going to add the non-vowels to this. So let's see, my A stir, I'm going to draw a line here to separate this from my code. A stir cons will start out being the empty string, and then I'm just going to kind of add it, go through the loop and add things as we go.
Okay.
So first I'm going to have L. L is not in my list,
Okay.
so L will be added.
Great.
Then I'm going to have A. A is in the list, so that if will be false, so it'll come back around. U is in the list, so I skip it again. N is not in the vowels list, so I'm going to keep N. Then I'm going to have C is not in the vowels list. H is not in the vowels list. Capital C is definitely not in my vowels list. And then I'll have lowercase o. Lowercase o is in my vowels list, so I'm going to skip that one. Lowercase d is not in there, so I'm going to keep that one. And then lowercase e is right there, so I'm going to skip that one. And
It's done.
I'm done. Okay, so that's cool. That's
Great.
the first step. That's
So
what I
looks
wanted to
like
get.
what we're looking for.
Okay, in the next loop, then I'm going to go from, let's see, my range is going to be, 0 to 5, because that's what I figured out here in the same
Okay.
test case. So when I is 0, 0 modulo 2 is going to be 0, so I'm going to keep that. So let me again build up this final stir. So I'm going to keep the L, because that's at index 0, 0 modulo 2 is 0. I is 1. I'm not going to keep that 1, so I'm going to leave out the N.
Okay.
Then I'm going to have I is 2. 2 modulo 2 is 0. That's the C
The
character.
lowercase c.
Then I'll just keep going like that. So I think that'll all work out the same, right?
Okay.
I'll skip over the H, I'll keep the capital C, I'll skip over the D.
Okay.
And then that's what I return. So I think that matches that's what we wanted to get here, right? So I think, is that good?
Excellent, great, yeah, so absolutely, just walking us through kind of like the solution that you've created here, we're getting the desired output. Of course, we're going to want to test a little bit further here to make sure we're getting everything that we want. So
Okay.
I'm going to give you another input string. Let's walk through it and see if we can't find anything that might change here. So
Okay.
let's change the input string to be, again, LaunchCode, but this time let's make it all uppercase.
Okay.
And let's see how that changes what's going to happen here.
I think I see a problem here. So I'm only checking for lowercase vowels.
Yes.
Which means that if I try to take all the vowels out, I'm going to leave in capital A and capital U and all that. So
Yes.
I actually wouldn't take any of the vowels out in this particular test
Yeah.
case. So I think I need to fix this top part so it removes uppercase vowels as well.
Yes.
The first thing that comes to mind is I can just add those uppercase vowels to my list. So let me do that, and then let me think about, see if maybe there's like another way to do it. So I'm going to add capital A, capital E, capital I, capital O, capital U. Okay, and then that all would just play out the same
Okay.
way, and I would remove capitals. So sometimes when I'm trying to solve problems with, and you want things to be like case sensitive or not, you might like use a to lower or something like that. So there might be a better way to do it with that. I'm not totally seeing that right now, but I might try to figure
Sure.
it out, because that might be a little bit of an
So,
easier, cleaner way.
The
right?
solution that you have now is great. You're essentially taking the strategy that we've already employed and just adding kind of the uppercase vowels or vowels to it, so that they're included in that check that we're doing in this conditional. But you're right. There's probably something that we can do here as well. Have you used the lower method built into strings before?
So this would work like if I had my stir dot lower, that would return the lowercase version of that string. Is that how
Yes,
that works?
exactly right.
Okay. I mean, it looks familiar. didn't come to mind right away. So I guess if maybe, how could I use that here?
Sure.
If I turned a string into lowercase.
So we don't want to change the output. We still want the uppercase and lowercase to be reflected in the output of our string.
Okay.
But one of the nice things that we can do with lower here, so when we're saying for C in a string here, what we can do here, if C not in vowels, we can actually say if C dot lower, because it's going to create a new instance of this specific object. It's not going to change it.
I see.
But it will just, at that time, make it a lowercase, and it'll say, hey, let's check it to see if it's in here or not.
Yeah, so what you're saying is if I got to like the capital L, this would say if lowercase l not in vowels, and instead of turning that capital L into a lowercase l. So
it just turns it into lowercase for that
just
specific
for this
instance.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so if I did that, then I guess I could just leave all these out. And then
So yeah,
check.
same solution. They're both going to work here. It's just different ways of going about doing it.
Okay.
Which is excellent here. So yeah, you caught that pretty quickly, that we were only checking half of all the vowels that we needed to check for here. And just by either adding in all those uppercase vowels or using kind of that built-in method, we were able to kind of account for those uppercase vowels as well. So
yeah, are there any other test cases that I need to consider?
Excellent. So right now, I don't really see anything. This looks like it's going to work. I mean, we've tested kind of uppercase letters, lowercase letters. I know we talked about, hey, there could be symbols or numbers in here. As far as I can see, if we threw symbols or numbers in here, they're never going to be true in either of these kind of conditional statements. So it's looking great right now. But right now, it's kind of, you're doing kind of two different things in one function. Typically as programmers, we try not to do that. We want to have them all, or one function doing one specific thing. So how can we break this into multiple functions?
Yeah, so I guess the two things I'm doing are kind of these two steps that I outlined at the very beginning. I'm taking out the vowels. That's kind of like, basically that piece. And then I'm taking out the odd index characters, which is that piece. So I think, what I could do is I could make a function for each of these, and then have my process string function call each of these functions. So if I put this code inside of a function called, say, remove vowels, and I put this code inside of a function that said remove odd chars, then I could just replace these two big loops with just calls to those functions. And then I'd have a shorter function here with two other functions, and that would be cleaner, I guess, right?
Yeah, it'd be a little bit cleaner. It's going to be easier to read when you're working with other programmers. You're going to have a very brief understanding of kind of like what you're doing here. So great, definitely a good way of kind of splitting it up here. So another thing that we can do here, just going a little bit further, this is a great solution, but have you used the within the string library, the replace method?
Okay.
Do you know what that does?
Yeah, I think so. If I remember right, it takes two arguments. It takes maybe like a string and then something to replace that substring with. So it'll check for like all of these instances in whatever this is and replace them with whatever these are.
Yes, exactly right.
Okay.
So that could be another way where we could eliminate this for loop. If we wanted to use this specific function, we could just pass in kind of these different variables. Hey, if this is in the string, let's replace that with just empty strings. As another way of removing it. Again, it doesn't change kind of the output of what we're doing here. It's just a different way of kind of solving this specific problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great.
Yeah, other than that, it looks like a great solution. A couple of points of kind of what you've done here, Chris, that means a lot to me as the interviewer. The first thing that you did is you gathered your requirements well. So I gave you a little bit of vague requirements, removing all the vowels. We didn't talk about why, what do we do with that? We didn't talk about upper versus lower. So I just gave you bad requirements. And that's the first thing you did is you just checked in with me. What are these requirements? Can we get a better understanding of what we're working on? Let's see, after you gave those requirements back to me, you fed back, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. The first thing you did is you just kind of pseudocoded it. Just got a high-level logic of this is ultimately what you're trying to do. You even put in some kind of keywords there. We're going to use a loop here. We're going to remove these specific vowels. We're going to loop over the vowel list string, remove odd index characters. This is just kind of keeping yourself on track. And then what you did after that is you just wrote code to match the exact pseudocode that you had up here. Obviously, you needed to expand upon these a little bit for the syntax to actually work. But you went through those. So finally, the last thing that you did that's very important as a programmer is you tested it as well. So I gave you one test string here. We found that your solution worked for it. I gave you another test string here. We found, hey, your solution doesn't work perfectly for this. There's no shame in that as a programmer. We make mistakes all the time, but but really what you want to be able to do is fix those specific mistakes. So this testing allowed us to figure out, hey, there's some cases that we're not allowing for here. So you definitely showed me that you've got a very strong problem-solving process, and you've definitely practiced it a lot as a programmer. So that's exactly what I look for as an interviewer in a live coding instance. So
Awesome.
great.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. That
Nice.
was fun.
Yeah,
Cool.
you're welcome.